Redjet to start official flights to Trinidad and Tobago in early August. Gymnasium workers protest today while industrial action is being threatened at the Sanitation Service Authority. And in sports, there will be new champs for the 25th Sir Gary Sobers Schools Tournament. Barbados is in for some rough weather tonight as Met officials predict heavy showers, isolated thunderstorms and occasional gusty winds. As a matter of fact, as we speak, Barbados is under a flood watch, which was issued this afternoon by the government's meteorological office at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Meteorologist David Best joins us now. David, what's the very latest? What happened here?
A very good evening to you, Pearson. Well, as I speak, the line of instability is still very much affecting Barbados and some of the islands in the island chain. As a matter of fact, we were tracking this area of unsettled weather from way out in the eastern Atlantic. The radar imagery, however, showed that this line of activity contains some very heavy showers and isolated thunderstorms, and as a result, we are experiencing these conditions. Now, we had a reading from a friend of ours in the Hastings area. So far, from 4:45 this evening to 6, they have recorded something like 24.5 millimeters of rainfall and still counting. Now, indications are that this band, though you can see is a rather narrow band, that is going to be pushing into the area. As a result, the flood watch that we have issued is going to be in effect until around 9 o'clock this evening. So we are expecting the intensity of that precipitation to fall off, but I'll give you all the details later.
Thank you, David. Caution, no doubt, is the word. Well, after a much long controversy, low-cost airline Redjet will begin regular flights to Trinidad next month. Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Ian Burns today announced that August the 8th is the date set for the start of operations. But before Redjet gets into full flight to Port of Spain, the airline is offering special promotional flights for Cropover and the Rihanna concert.
So they are I think 6 specific flights that we're running over the Cropover season and the Rihanna-led concert. Okay, they're specifically for those events. We are starting our scheduled services on the 8th of August, and that will be 4 times a week, and that will build up then to daily, and hopefully more than that.
Mr. Burns declined comment on information that Redjet has been granted permission to fly to Jamaica. He says he's not been officially informed. He has, however, reported a 50% increase in business for the airline in the first 2 months of flying to Guyana.
The amount of people travelling on that route has grown, obviously, significantly. The amount of people who have travelled, who said simply they could not have travelled but for the fares that were available to them. And it has brought huge benefit, both socially and economically.
We'll have more on Redjet and its pricing later in the business report. Industrial action seems to be looming at the Sanitation Service Authority, and it could come at the height of the cropover season. General Secretary of the National Union of Public Workers, Dennis Clark, is warning Barbadians that if a permanent appointment is not made to the position of General Manager, SSA employees will take action. He says he wishes no harm to the general public, but the issue must be addressed immediately.
At this point in time, I would wish that we can get it resolved without the union having to avert to other kind of tactics, for which I believe we will want to offer to the general public early o'clock that, whatever action we take, we mean no harm to the general public, but there is every right that Mr. Allen should be appointed to the job after so long a period of time. So look out. Next week, the festivities start next week, and watch carefully. There may be no Sanitation Service Authority services coming.
Mr. Clark says dozens of appointments have been made at the SSA, but the appointment of a general manager has apparently been put on hold. He says Stanton Allen has been acting in that top post for over 7 years, and it is time that a decision is made.
Mr. Allen has been acting in the post now for 7 clear straight years, and this has nothing to do with the other years prior to someone who worked for a short while as general manager. He's acting in the post. And we were made to understand that a recommendation was made recently by the last minister for him to be appointed to the post. But somewhere along the line, it would appear now as though there's a reversal of that situation and Mr. Allen is not being appointed. This has an effect for also his deputy, because you're not appointing Mr. Allen, and therefore the deputy cannot be appointed.
Meanwhile, employees of the Wilde Gymnasium staged a protest today to press demands for outstanding pensions. The employees staged that protest during their lunch hour and carried placards to highlight their grievances. Peter Thorne reports.
About 25 workers at the Wilde Gymnasium staged a peaceful protest for about an hour, calling for overdue pension plans. They say talks had begun with management since January this year in an effort to resolve the matter, but there's been no solution so far. The workers are claiming that this is just the beginning of their protests, noting that if nothing concrete is put on the table, they will be stepping up their action.
They're talking about human resource management and all this kind of thing. How they're talking about human resource management when they're ill-treating the workers? I mean, when the Chinese come to Barbados, they compliment the way how the gymnasium is kept, but yet we cannot derive any benefits from the gymnasium, right? So we have workers who have given human service to the gymnasium, right? And they're on their retirement. They're actually retiring. We have a guy that is going to retire next year, right? How would he go and function with nothing?
Senior industrial representative with the National Union of Public Workers, Delcia Burke, says the talks have been protracted, noting that several boards have promised to rectify the matter, but to no avail. She was supported by General Manager Dennis Clark, who says it's high time that a pension plan is put in place for gymnasium workers.
The politicians in this country, they all have a pension plan in place for them. Right? Don't care how they might do that they contribute, the amount of money that they contribute can't give them the type of pension plan that they have in place for parliamentarians. And I think all of them, on both sides, should hold their heads down in shame as to see how they're treating the gymnasium workers. One of the other difficulties that you run across, today these workers don't know who they really are in terms of their status in this institution or the institution of itself.
Reacting to the development, Minister of Family Stephen Lashley says he understands the workers' frustration, adding that moves are being put in place to try and resolve the issue.
I have asked the board of the gymnasium because it does appear to me that obviously there seems to be a lack of flow of information to the staff. And I've asked the board to give the necessary instructions to the management to meet as soon as possible with the staff, to bring the staff up to date on what is happening with the pension plan.
Both the union and the workers are hoping the issue can be resolved soon. Peter Thorne, CBC News.
News from the House of Assembly now. Parliament began debate today on the long-awaited Prevention of Corruption Bill 2010. One of the key provisions of the bill, as outlined by the Attorney General Adriel Brathwaite, will be the declaration of assets of everyone in public life, including members of Parliament, their spouses and children under 18. Mr. Brathwaite says while MPs have no problem declaring their assets, there are concerns related to other persons considered to be in public life. He says statutory board members will also have to declare their assets, and this could raise some eyebrows.
Given that we now ask many members of the public to serve on boards, and in particular to serve on boards for, it's almost charity in terms of what they're paid, that in fact that there may be very well now be a reluctance for many of them to step forward and volunteer to serve as board members in circumstances where they're being asked to make the type of declarations that they're being asked to make under this bill is drafted, and indeed the consequences that can flow if they fail to make this type of declarations.
Well, under the legislation, any person who fails to file a declaration is liable on conviction or indictment to a fine of $500,000 or to imprisonment for 5 years or both. The Attorney General says the legislation is important as Barbados is already known as a country which is not corrupt.
There's a time when in Barbados so that we heard about persons applying to have land subdivided, and we were told that in fact that the land was in a Zone 1 area and therefore could not be used for construction purposes. And we heard, sir, about the land being sold, and soon afterwards the new purchasers being allowed to develop the land. Again, sir, this bill, sir, would address issues such as that, so that if there's any malfeasance, sir, that in fact that this bill will address issues such as that, sir.
Deputy Opposition Leader Dale Marshall says while the Barbados Labour Party supports any legislation which will clamp down on corruption, they have some concerns with the bill. In fact, Mr. Marshall says the bill will interfere with the process of democracy if political parties are asked to disclose the names and addresses of people who fund their campaigns. Mr. Marshall says many people fund parties but don't want any exposure, and this will cause them to go into hiding.
What is being done, sir, perhaps inadvertently, is to take the gifts of all of those individuals who over the years have sacrificed to help support the work of political parties, especially as it relates to elections. Before I became a candidate, sir, I gave to the Barbados Labour Party. There are some people on that side who I know gave to the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party. But what is the rationale?
Mr. Marshall says the President and the Chief Executive Officer of trade unions will also have to declare their assets, and he doesn't believe this group should be targeted.
We have searched every other piece of legislation in the region, sir, and we have not found anybody else who has sought to draw trade unionists into this net. And I believe, sir, that the trade unionists will have something significant to say on this issue, sir. I hope that they will not lie supine while this is being pushed down their throat.
Well, Prime Minister Frendel Stewart says Nelson Mandela has imparted lessons that humanity can learn from through his sacrifice and commitment to the principle of justice and fair play for all. He's described the former South African president and towering figure in the anti-apartheid struggle as a great man who refused to become a prisoner even though he was behind bars and whose actions helped to imprison those who confined him. He made the comments as the House of Assembly paid tribute to Mr. Mandela on his 93rd birthday.
Nelson Mandela did not spend time in prison. He used time in prison. He read, he communed with himself, he wrote letters, he jotted down notes, he reflected on life, its ups and its downs, the long term and the short term, so that when he emerged in 1990, he was ready not just to lead a country, but he was ready to lead the world. And he has been leading it ever since then.
Mr. Stewart likened Mr. Mandela to the Apostle Paul, who was imprisoned for fighting injustice and telling the truth, and who wrote some of the most telling letters in prison.
I should like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to congratulate Mr. Mandela on completing 93 years, to thank him for the sterling example he has set, not only for his countrymen, but for all of us in whatever part of the world we are found, to applaud those persons responsible for the award of the Nobel Peace Prize for understanding the importance of his contribution and according to him the recognition he so rightly and so richly deserved.
Member of Parliament for St. Michael South East Hamilton Lashley has described Nelson Mandela as one of the greatest ever freedom fighters. This as he again called for schools in Barbados to teach African history. He believes this would help to reawaken the consciousness of our people, and he's called on Barbadians to celebrate Emancipation Day and remember the struggle that our forefathers and people like Nelson Mandela had to wage.
Nelson Mandela will not only be recognized as a leader, but also in our terms when we had to fight the Black Power struggle in the same 70s, sir, to be recognized, sir, as a freedom fighter. But what is also significant, sir, is that you have the letter M, sir, is very significant among black leaders and the greatest black leaders that we've had. You have Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, you have Marcus Garvey, and perhaps, sir, the most eloquent speaker that ever walked on the earth, in my view, Malcolm X.
Minister of the Environment and Drainage Dr. Dennis Lowe has described Nelson Mandela as a great international hero who represents all that's good whilst fighting for justice for the poor and downtrodden. Mr. Lowe says Mr. Mandela represents a symbol of hope and inspiration for millions across the globe. He says Mr. Mandela's spirit and will helped to break the shackles of apartheid and engender social justice and equity for millions of South Africans.